Hello and welcome to YouTube Developers Live. I have an exciting show for you today. In London, we have Ross McElroy. How are you doing, Ross?
Doing good, thanks. How are you?
Doing great. And my name is Jarek Wilkiewicz. I work on YouTube Developer Relations. Today we'll talk about the YouTube Android Player API. If you have watched our Google I/O presentation, you might actually recognize Ross, who was one of the presenters at that session. I understand you've been quite busy since Google I/O, Ross. That was earlier this year. Can you tell us what you have been up to?
Sure. So we've been working with some trusted testers and refining the API, making sure it works well, adding some missing features, and making sure that all the bits were in place to make sure we can enable you to play all the YouTube content embedded within your app. So just final polishing and ready for launch.
Great. I know that you have built a set of demos to help application developers use the API. Should we look at a couple of the examples that are included as a part of the release?
Sure. So look.
OK, let's start with the video wall. I'll launch it right now.
Sure. So the video wall is an example of what you might be able to do with the app by putting all the components of the API together. So it's a simple demo of thumbnails flip in, and then one of the thumbnails will flip in and turn to a video. So that shows you how you can embed the videos within your UI and play and pause them programmatically.
Looks like that's 14,000.
Great. And moving along, there is a simple player view demo included as well. Can you tell us when one might want to include this code?
Sure. So the simple player view is just the simplest possible approach to using the API with embedding a video into your app. So this is just embedding a simple player view into the UI, nothing else apart from a text view, but you can put whatever you want above. And it's just showing how simple it is to embed it as a player view. We also have the simple player fragment, which is basically the same demo, but using YouTube player fragment as opposed to a player view. And you might want to use that if you need to extend a different activity. For the player view, you need to extend our activity that we provide as part of the API. The fragment, you can extend any activity you like and just embed the fragment.
Great. And custom player controls.
So this is just a demo of wiring up UI controls to the programmatic elements of the player. So you can play pause with the buttons which are under your control. And underneath we have an event log which is showing the various callbacks that you can register and listen for example, playing videos, seeing when the video has ended, and when the user has pressed pause, etc.
Great. And I understand you've made some improvements to full screen handling, which is something that is always very tricky for developers. Custom
Sure.
full screen handling illustrates that one.
It does, yes. By default, full screen is a dialog which appears on top of your activity. And so that works very well, but it sometimes introduces some buffering. So custom full screen shows our best practices on how to deal with full screen. And so in that case, you have to manage the relayout to full screen yourself. But by doing that, you get a really smooth transition to full screen with no buffering.
Indeed. And there is a demo that shows you how you can actually include full screen in your application here. Is that the overlay action bar demo?
Yeah, so the overlay action bar demo is just showing how you can overlay an action bar on top of the player while it's in full screen mode, as long as the action bar has overlay set. And so this is to enable you to, for example, have some custom buttons in the action bar to enable some control for your app while it's in full screen, because we don't allow you to overlay any custom views on top of the player itself other than the action bar.
Right. And then I've seen applications performing video playback into a lightbox. Which demo actually shows that feature?
So that's the standalone player demo. And so that one's just showing a different approach to playing video, which is not embedding it in your UI, but instead launching a separate activity. So it's much simpler to do, but you don't get as much flexibility or control. So if you click the lightbox mode and you play the video, you can see the video appearing above the underlying activity. And so that's a good option if you want to just show a quick preview of a video alongside your UI.
Okay, great. And these examples are packaged together as a part of the API release, right?
Yeah, that's right. We provide them in the library, so you can get going.
Okay, let's walk through the API. So can you tell us a little more about what is the process of integration between this API and one's Android application?
Sure. So once you download the zip, you'll have the sample apps and a library directory, which contains the jar of the API. And so to embed the API in your own application, all you need to do is take that jar, copy it to the libs directory in your project root, and if you have Eclipse or IntelliJ, I think as well, it'll automatically add that to your Java class path, and then you can just use it straight away. It's already in your app. One thing you'll need to do is apply for register for a developer key on the Google APIs console. And so once you've done that, you can initialize the API and make use of it.
Great. And then there's actually 4 different ways in which video playback can be incorporated into your Android application. Can you walk us through the API? I know we have Java docs with all this information. Maybe real quickly show us what are kind of the key classes.
Sure. So the final demo we showed there was the standalone player. So this is the class for the standalone player. You can see the code here. We have an example fragment. It's just 2 lines of code to create that sample standalone player, just passing your video ID that you want to play. And there's various different intents you can create with this class to play videos or playlists or use the lightbox mode. And then once you start the intent, that will throw up the activity which will play the video. So that's a really simple but less flexible way of playing videos. If you want to really embed the YouTube videos into your UI, we provide these 3 classes. There's the player view, the player fragment, and the player support fragment. So they all effectively act in the same way. They provide a view which you can inflate in your app UI or programmatically instantiate. And then once you have that, you call the initialize method on that UI element, pass your developer key and on initialize listener, and then you'll get a callback through your on initialize listener about when you've succeeded in initializing the API. And with that callback, you'll get one of these YouTube player objects. And so the YouTube player object is basically the main object in the whole API. And so this allows you to control video playback in those UI player views or player fragments. And so you can load videos, queue videos, skip between playlist elements, seek the video, do all the things you would expect from such an API. And also register for various callback events, so playback events or changes in the player state, or full screen events. And so the final way you can play YouTube videos using this API is through the YouTube intents class. And so this is basically just a convenience mechanism to enable you to create intents which will launch the YouTube Android application itself. So a lot of people have been using this in the past to play videos by building their own YouTube URLs and passing that as the intent. This just creates a standardized way of doing that with various options for starting the video in full screen or playing playlists or opening a user's activity in the app itself.
YouTube standalone player is the simplest way to get started. Player view and player fragment will allow one to build the most sophisticated user interface. And then YouTube intents class basically wraps the intents that are available from the YouTube app, and it just invokes the app from one's application.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And you mentioned that as a part of the initialization process, one can actually encounter various error conditions. Can you quickly walk us through what these errors are and what are the best practices around handling them?
You get this uninitialized error, uninitialized failure, result, which will provide a YouTube initialization result alongside the callback. So this is an enum that has a various options for what went wrong. And so various things could go wrong in connecting to the API service. So one of the ones which you could encounter is developer key invalid if you've not got a valid developer key, or invalid application signature. So we require that your application's APK has been signed in the same way that it would be signed to be uploaded onto the Google Play Store. And then there's various other ones which can be recoverable. So this example is the service disabled, service missing, or service version update required. So if you get one of these initialization results, then the method isUser recoverable error will return true. And so this means that there's something that the user can do to make the API work. So what they may have done is disabled the YouTube app, or they may have uninstalled it, or they have an old version which doesn't have the API service available. And so if you have one of these errors, you can call get error dialog on the YouTube initialization result, and we'll create a dialog for you which identifies the problem to the user. For example, they need to update the YouTube app, and gives them a button to press which will take them straight to market and enable them to update it there. And then once they return to your activity, we'll pass back the request code that you've passed into the get error dialog to on activity result, and you can check whether the resolution was successful or not, and if so, reinitialize the player view or player fragment.
Great. So it sounds like the two common errors will be
developer key related. So the API does require a developer key, unlike the existing player APIs. And in fact, I've noticed people that we've worked with frequently run into this issue with trying to run the examples. So you actually have to go in and change the developer key. And you can obtain that version 3 developer key from our developer console. If you need to know more about YouTube Data API v3, go to our blog, apiblog.youtube.com, where you will find a lot of additional information. This API was recently launched. And then the other one, which is actually user recoverable, is related to version check that the API performs. And this is where the application developer can actually work in concert with the user and help the user update the app if that is in fact necessary in order for the API to function on the device, right? And then the API supports Android version 2.2 and above, is that correct?
Yeah, 2.2 and above, Froyo, all the way to Jelly Bean.
Great. So another question I had about the API is, do you support live stream playback?
So we support live stream playback, but due to the video format that's used by YouTube, only Android devices from Honeycomb MR1 and above will support live videos. So that would be version 3.1 of the platform. If the device is greater than 3.1 or above, it will be able to play live videos. Otherwise, it won't.
Great. Speaking of compatibility, I guess the fundamental question an application developer might ask is, is the library compatible with my device? Do I actually have all the prerequisites for the library to run? So how can one determine whether the library is actually supporting one's device?
Sure. Yeah, so we provide this YouTube API service util
class, and within that there is YouTube API service available call. And when you call that, you'll get back again one of these YouTube initialization results. And so that'll again either give you the success result, which means the API is there and available and you can use it, or it might give you one of the ones which you can initialize a dialog to enable the user to recover from, or there may be some other error which you can identify and use another mechanism to play back the video.
great. And then as far as the initialization time,
say if I'm working on an older Android device, is there anything that I need to be worried about? Can you tell us a little bit more about, how long does it take to initialize the library?
So the initialization is asynchronous, and the reason for that is it can sometimes take some time to spin up the activity which the service is provided by. So on older devices, if the YouTube app isn't already running, it may take a second or so for that to happen. Now, once that's happening, the UI of the player has a spinner loading, and it's not blocking the UI thread, so it's not going to affect your animations or your graphics. But the player is not going to be available until that's happened. So If you are worried about this on older devices, what you could do is hide the player view until initialization successes come back, and then load the video into it. But usually it's just going to be under 200 milliseconds or so on modern devices, in which point the player view will be initialized. And once you have one player view initialized, then the service is already up and running. It will be much faster each time to connect.
Great, and as you said, the whole process is asynchronous, so the developer can actually trigger the initialization at the best opportunity for a given application.
Exactly, and the UI looks much the same while it's loading the service as when it's loading the first video buffering, so there's a seamless transition there. The user shouldn't notice a difference between the API initializing and the first video buffering.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Ross. I know you need to run off and do your holiday shopping. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been too busy building the API to do any holiday shopping.
All right. Well, hopefully you will have enough time before the holidays. Thank you very much again. And for those of you watching, thank you for your attention. And we'll see you again on YouTube Developers Live.